Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the May 21st, 2025 City Council meeting. City Council's already been busy this evening. We had an exec session to start our evening. Now we've got the regular meeting. So please stand for invocation and then pledge of allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this great community of ours. Thank you for the amazing weather that we have had. I thank you for our leaders that are gathered here this evening and watching at home. Just ask for the best for our city, and that I pray for teamwork and your continued grace on our community. We have a lot coming up for us, and we will definitely need your blessing as we move forward. I ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening is new employee introductions. Eileen, do we have any new employees we're introducing? We do not. Okay. Next on the agenda is citizen input and community announcements. This is an opportunity for audience members to address the city council on items that are not on the agenda. If you are wishing to address the council, there should be yellow cards like these on the podium there behind Mr. Perez. If you want to address the council, please fill that out and take it to our city recorder for notation and to give to me. You are allowed to sell time to somebody if they need to speak longer than the three minutes that are allotted. Please direct your comments to the mayor, and if there's something that can be addressed or handled here in the meeting, we will do so. If not, it'll be carried over to another time or conversation with staff. The first person I have is Greg Perez, and then Barry Johnson, you sold your time to him, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Perez, you have 6 minutes.
Okay, hello, I'm Greg Perez. I live here in Canby at 121 Northwest 12th Avenue. We've reached a crossroads in the city of Canby in the way of our administration, financial department, the way of handling employees, and so forth. Our city administrator witnessed, as we all know from the last city council meeting, the berating and the harassment that was given to one employee, and she did nothing about it. And according to city manager, city administrator positions, one is he's basically financially sound or strong in human resources. And as far as I can see so far, none of them apply. So we have some issues here, and they need to be addressed. We can't just let this kick the can down the road and look the other way, because that's what's happening. And I think the people that put you in position, Mayor, expected more out of you you can't handle the employee positions, but you know what's going on. And you, as a person, needs to come together as a group and iron these things out properly and not just go on the merry way and do nothing about it. Because you are going to be part of the problem when we go south, and we're doing that now. Some of the other things I'd like to bring up is it's created a hostile work environment here, whether anybody knows or not. Yes, it is happening. And I think the people that are doing it need to own up to it. And I think the counselors up there need to own up to it too and head it off. I understand we don't have an HR person, but one's in the works. But you're letting this fester. Do you want to be part of the history of taking this city down? Because you're doing a good job of it. You're doing a good job when you see this continuously go on daily. Now, the city council and the mayor have the authority to resolve this issue, but they don't seem to have the fortitude to make a strong decision when it comes to letting somebody go or filling out their evaluation report correctly and just let it go once again by the wayside. It'll go away. It'll fix itself. If you think that, you don't need to be sitting up there if you think it's going to fix itself, because it's not. City administrator, city manager, whatever you want to call it, one that needs to be strong in financial or HR. Like I said before, we have neither. Auditor, financial director, two entirely different definitions. Checks and balances, one watches daily at what goes in, one goes out. That's not working either. When it came time to budget time, you guys got the budget a few days before the budget meeting. What is that? You can't start a budget meeting without these individuals seeing it at least a minimum of 7 days prior. If you have questions, you'll have time to do research and ask those questions when the meeting comes up, not start from scratch. And that's exactly what was being done. And that's what had been done. I think performance of reviews on individual city administrator, financial director, I think they both stepped out of their lane by berating, harassment with employees. And that continues to go on. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think we have some bully complaints, ethics complaints, and we letting this go? We're just going to let it go and continue and kick the bucket down the road? That's not how you run a business. And if you do, you'll falter. Job-wise, you're falter. If you keep faltering job-wise and not continue to go up, there's a problem. There's a leadership problem, and it's pretty evident that everybody's seeing it in town. I've talked to clubs in town, to business owners in town that are saying the same thing. Where is the leadership? Where is the coming together, working together to resolve issues instead of, well, let's just move it out another next meeting. We'll just bench it, store it for next meeting. Another question I have is on the budget, and I think somebody's going to come up behind me and speak on that. We want to know where the money is. We want to know why is it so hard to get records that are available to the public, and there's a stalemate there. Nobody wants to work with its citizens. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the taxpayers in this community pay over 70% of the general fund. Am I correct?
Perhaps. I don't know.
You probably should know this. It's in your budget. It was in your budget meeting. And that's all I have to say for right now. Was that my 3?
That was your
That was
6.
your 6.
Okay. I'll be back. And I'd also like to say, if we need to do a recall on any positions, that's in the works too. That way, you won't kick this bucket down the street.
Next up is Jim Simnett.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff. Thank you guys for the time. I appreciate it. My name's Jim Simnett, born and raised in Canby, grew up here. And I saw the Parks and Rec Board doing a lot of good things. And so I got joined about a year ago, which was pretty awesome.
Can you bring the mic just a little closer to you?
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I saw them doing a lot of good stuff, and so I got to join it, and it was really neat to see how things are progressing with the workout facility over at Legacy Park, and the turfs that was put in at Maple, and just different things that have been happening. And so it's been pretty, I guess, rewarding to see these things like move along. And so I appreciate that and appreciate the council's help with all that too. One of the questions that we had kind of as a board, and I think we've had it multiple times, and I think there's been requests, but I guess my question for you guys too, I wanted to elevate it again to you guys, was how do we find out where the city or the Parks and Rec maintenance fee where that goes, how much that is available to us to kind of start to portion out, and not to us to make decisions necessarily, but that we could start planning ahead to use some of that money too. Because you look at the parks, and the parks they look great. Staff has done a great job with those parks. But can some of that money be used for some upgrades, things like that? And those are the questions that we had. Because we know that the SDC funds, we got a big, long meeting about that with Dawn, and different people were telling us about the SDC funds and how that works for like going forward and building out new projects. But that's not going to cover everything, and that's not going to cover everything we need. So with the money, as a taxpayer, I guess fee payer, because it's a fee, where that is. And so how do we ask that in the right way? And that's why I guess I'm kind of elevating it to you guys. What do we need to do on the board to ask you?
So from what I understand, Jim, in that process, and I know that our finance director is here as well, my understanding is that it comes in and it falls under a single line item.
Okay.
Scott's nodding affirmatively. So it would take the finance team to break that down into the different, I guess, parse that out into the different buckets where the funds or expenses would be occurring. And so right now, so a conversation amongst the staff and we were having with the committee that's been put together for reviewing the street maintenance fee is that the accounting software that we use will not enable us to break that down into the granular detail that you were asking about, from what I understand. Is that what I'm understanding? So
And I'm not really
looking
asking
at the budget though for this year, are there larger pieces that can be broken out? That I don't know. I think it's worth asking the question and having the conversation about.
Yeah, and I'm not asking about like bags of fertilizer, that's not
Sure.
what we're worried about. It's just how much money really is there, because there's a lot of things that we want to do, and we want to do for the parks, and, like upgrading bathrooms and parking and things like that. But we're not really sure where we are with that and how that would work, so.
Okay, well, we have budget meetings tomorrow night and then the following Thursday as well. So those are definitely going to be topics that can come up and will come up in terms of conversation.
Okay.
So, yeah, because a lot of that is for, that fee, that fund was for, also for labor costs to cover that, the addition of people to help with maintaining and getting caught up on park maintenance and things. So, and that's still a lot of it that's being used for that. So the project piece front of it, like the recreation complex and the things at Maple Street, those were SDC, so system development charges. So maintaining those don't apply to system development charges. That comes out of the general fund and the park maintenance fee that we collect.
Right. And that I do understand it. And the maintenance is our personnel, I guess. We're just looking for numbers, and we've gotten nothing. That's why I'm kind of elevating it to you, because it'd be nice to know something.
Okay.
Or at least an answer of we don't know. That's an answer too,
Okay.
but just an answer would be great.
No, okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
You can ask that tomorrow. Thank you.
David Tate. And sorry, David, to interrupt you. So this is an agenda item for tonight. Do you mind waiting until we get to that conversation tonight?
At the pleasure of the mayor.
Thank you, sir. I can't appreciate that.
Did you just notice that?
I did, so. Everybody likes to talk in the front end.
Consent agenda?
No, I'm not quite ready for the consent agenda. Mr. Perez, will you come back up here, please?
This is unorthodox.
Because I'd like to address some of your comments that you made.
Sure.
And before you address that, I'd like to say on the rec, Parks and Rec, I think it brings in $400,000 a year. And correct me if I'm wrong, but since 2020 till now, $400,000 a year till now is a lot of money. So that's why they're questioning where it's going, what's left, what is it split with. They want to know that, and they've been asking this questions since last year.
No,
And nobody, you know that, don't you?
Yeah, no, I do.
And you
I'm aware.
gave them no answers. You're the leader.
Are you done?
No, not yet. I'm
Oh,
not.
please, then continue.
Okay. But you're the leader. You're the one that needs to find this stuff out for them if nobody else is giving the answers. Probably because they don't know. Or they can't figure it out. You can't have people in positions like that if they can't do the job. They need to do their job. And it's your job to make sure that happens. Okay, shoot.
So to some of your comments, Greg, about what occurred 2 weeks ago, now, there are pieces, or even with terms of conversations we as a council have on the performance of our city manager, that is not for public conversation. You know, I gave you your 6 minutes and some, so let me finish.
Well, wait a minute. I thought we never addressed anything like this. You would email me and let me know like you did last time.
Yes,
So are you going to try to publicly ridicule me?
I'm not ridiculing you at all.
I'm just
sir.
asking you a question. Is that yes or no?
No, I'm not
Okay.
here to ridicule you, and I'm just giving you information.
Okay.
That, yes, we have been addressing these things, okay? And it's not just.
If
it's
you've
not
been
done-
addressing them, then let it go. If you're going to address it tonight, let it go.
But you seem to not want to let it go. And that is
Well, you know why?
explained.
Because I've already
It's
asked the
been
city
explained.
administrator for the meeting that she was going to have with her people on getting the people back to work here in this building, that taxpayers had a portion of this. No answer, no email, nothing, because they don't care.
Okay. Okay.
Mayor, I'm so sorry. Can I step in?
We're done.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda, which is the approval of the January 31, 2025 City Council goal-setting minutes and the approval of the April 16th, 2025 City Council regular meeting minutes. And I have a question. Those seem pretty random. Is it just we're catching up on things? Okay, thank you. Second.
Motion's been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Maldonado to approve the consent agenda, which include the minutes of the January 31st, 2025 City Council goal setting and the meeting minutes of the April 16th, 2025 City Council regular meetings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is ordinances and resolutions. The first item 5A, ordinance number 1643, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with DeWitt Construction in the amount of $837,720 for the Walnut Street Sanitary Sewer Highway 99E and Railroad Boring Project.
Mr. Mayor, this is the second reading, so I will just move to adopt ordinance number 1643, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute a contract with DeWitt Construction in the amount of $837,720 for the Walnut Street Sanitary Sewer Highway 99E and Railroad Bore Project.
Second.
There's kind of a tie over here, I'm not sure.
So, Spencer, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
Can you just give a quick highlight on that project since we have so many people in attendance?
Yes, so this project is for the first phase of the Walnut Street extension. It's just getting the sewer subbed over into the property. So boring underneath 99 and the trail railroad tracks. And then just kind of getting the first phase of everything else. It was faster to get this broken up into a couple of different phases with dealing with the ODOT and all the other comments.
Okay, thank you very much. All those in favor?
It's the second reading.
Sorry, thank you. Roll call vote.
Counselor Patton?
Aye.
Counselor Maldonado?
Aye.
Council President Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Davis?
Aye.
Counselor Stearns?
Aye.
Counselor Waterman?
Aye. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item 5B, ordinance number 1644, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to purchase 4 transit vans for Cambry Area Transit from Northwest Bus Sales in the amount of $457,876. Heidi, hello.
Hello.
You want to give us, I know it's a second reading, want to give a quick recap on that?
Yep, so this is just to purchase 4 new transit vans that are going to replace 2 of our cutaway buses that have reached their end of useful life by the standards set by the state. So,
Nothing new since the last meeting?
nothing new.
Okay, then I move that we adopt ordinance number 1644, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to purchase 4 transit vans for Canby Area Transit from Northwest Bus Sales in the amount of $457,876.
Second. Motion's been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Maldonado to approve ordinance number 1644, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to purchase 4 transit vans for Canby Area Transit from Northwest Bus Sales in the amount of $457,876. Roll call vote.
Counselor Patton?
Aye.
Counselor Maldonado?
Aye.
Council President Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Davis?
Aye.
Counselor Stearns?
Aye.
Counselor Waterman?
Aye.
Great. Thanks.
I'll stay.
Stay, all right.
Yeah, you're the next one, too.
5C, consider ordinance number 1645, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to purchase 1 transit bus for Canby Area Transit in the amount of $180,796, which was amended on 5/19/2025. Also a second reading.
Yep, so basically same information, but this one's just replacing one of our cutaways that has also reached the end of useful life. And it was also a different style than what we've originally had in the past, so kind of going in a different direction.
No new information, but maybe just for the viewing audience, explain the amendment on the agenda in case somebody might wonder.
There was a typo in the number of
Vehicles, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Very good, then. I move that we adopt ordinance number 1645, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to purchase 1 transit bus for Canby Area Transit in the amount of $180,796.
Second.
Motion has been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Maldonado to approve ordinance number 1645, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to purchase 1 transit bus for Canby Area Transit in the amount of $180,796. Roll call vote.
Counselor Counselor Patton?
Aye.
Counselor Maldonado?
Aye.
Council President Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Davis?
Aye.
Counselor Stearns?
Aye.
Counselor Waterman?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. 5D, ordinance number 1646, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement in the amount of $60,000 between the city of Canby and Lucy Hale, our city prosecutor.
Yes.
And also up for second reading. Hello,
Good evening.
How are you?
Hello.
Hello
Doing all
again.
right, thank you.
Anything new?
Nothing new. No.
No, we're still moving forward. Okay? Yeah.
I move to adopt ordinance 1646, an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement in the amount of $60,000 between the city of Canby and Lucy Hale, the city prosecutor.
Great, thank you.
Second.
Motion has been made by Councilor Waterman and seconded by Councilor Davis to approve ordinance number 1646. An ordinance authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement in the amount of $60,000 between the city of Canby and Lucy Hale for city prosecutor. All those in favor?
Second reading.
Thanks. Second reading.
Counselor Patton?
Aye.
Counselor Maldonado?
Aye.
Council President Hensley?
Aye.
Counselor Davis?
Aye.
Counselor Stearns?
Aye.
Counselor Waterman?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Consider, 5E, ordinance number 1647.
My favorite one of the year.
An ordinance adopting findings to support an exemption from the formal selection process for a contract for sludge hauling services and declaring such exemption and authorizing direct award of a contract to Herd Farms.
Good evening.
Boopy wow.
Just like President Hensley said, usually we come here once a year and talk with you about approving the Herd Farms contract, which includes hauling solids from our wastewater treatment plant to Roseburg for further treatment. What this is actually asking is, hey, could we circumvent doing this every single year, because we know Herd Farms is the only deal in town for us, really. There aren't any other entities that can compete with them. They're the one-stop shop. So because we know that, we've been doing this for 13 years and did it again last year, what we're asking is, could we be approved for having an exemption to direct award this contract for 5 years, and then each year we will sit down and go over what the expenses are and come to the budget committee and get your approval on an annual basis for the next 5 years is what we're asking tonight.
Yeah, I remember, as long as we've been on the council, we've been doing this contract, and I would be in favor of that. I know that after a second, we can have more discussion, so just to move things forward, I move to approve ordinance number 1647, an ordinance adopting findings to support an exemption from the formal selection process for contracting sludge hauling services, declaring such an exemptive, authorizing direct award of a contract to Herd Farms Incorporated.
Second.
Motion has been made by Council President Hensley to approve ordinance number 1647, an ordinance adopting findings to support an exemption from the formal selection process for a contract for sludge hauling services, declaring such exemption, and authorizing direct award of a contract to Herd Farms. Made by Council President Hensley, second by Council Patton. Any discussion or questions?
Question.
Yeah.
So we're just approving the exemption from having them bid it out, correct?
Right.
But the final contract amount, I assume, is above the $50,000, right?
Yes,
And
so
so it'll
it's-
come before council to approve or not approve it, right?
So it would be a direct award. I'm asking for a direct award for a 5-year contract, and every year it will be approved in the budget. And yes, I believe I would have to come back because Eileen wouldn't be able to sign for anything over 50,000.
So we're not giving up the right of the council to approve it, we're just giving up the process.
Solicitation,
And
RFP,
saving
which
the
costs a
city
lot of
works.
staff time.
Yeah,
and-
okay.
Yeah,
I just want to verify that.
advertising and all of that, yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Final item under ordinances and resolution, 5F, consider resolution number 1433, a resolution adopting an updated contracting and procurement policy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Scott Schlag, Finance Director. Also with me is Ashley Dugill, who will be with BEH, who has worked with myself and Brenda and Eileen, the City Administrator, in pretty much redlining and updating our much-needed procurement policy here at the city. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ashley.
Thank you. And good evening, Council. This is the first step in a larger staff effort to update the city's approach to public contracting and procurement generally, and also educate key staff members on these procedures and policies. So as a first step, I took a look at your existing procurement rules and purchasing policies and did a comprehensive update and review to make it compliant with state law, and also just to simplify your rules. There were a few sections that were a little outdated or maybe a little wordy, so simplified and clarified those. And as Scott said, a big thanks to Brenda, who's not here today, but was instrumental in doing that update, Brenda Graves. We've included a summary of the changes in the staff report as well. I can answer specific questions on any of those, but rather than reading it all out for you all, I'll just let you ask specific questions that you have.
Do we have any questions or comments on the policy? Everybody have a chance to read through it?
I breezed through it. I didn't get to comb over it like I would like to.
Yes, Councilor Patton.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 1433, a resolution adopting an updated contracting and procurement policy.
Second.
I guess the motion's been made by Councilor Patton and seconded by Councilor Maldonado to approve Resolution 1433, a resolution adopting an updated contracting and procurement policy. Any further discussion or comment?
No, Mr. Mayor, I will be abstaining from this vote because, as I said, I didn't get to comb over it as much as I wanted to, considering my life circumstances right now. So I will just abstain from this vote.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And abstentions?
Okay.
So that passes 5-0-1. Easy enough. Thank you both very much. Thanks for the work on that. All right, we're going to move into old business this evening, IGA with Clackamas County for homeless services funding.
That's me. So this is exciting. It's been a bit of a road to get here, but this is an exciting opportunity that Clackamas County has given to us. So back in 2023, Clackamas County Board of Commissioners allocated a certain amount of money to give to jurisdictions and community partners within Clackamas County who provide services to extremely low-income folks, including those who are housing insecure or are suffering from homelessness. So back at that time, the city staff put together a proposal to receive some of that funding and submitted it to the county. So it was the library, it was the police department, and one other, I believe. And the what?
Canby Center.
And the Canby Center, which not a city department, a community nonprofit. And the county granted quite a lot of money to both the city directly and then to the county center, to the Canby Center to fund those services in the proposals. So what this IGA here in front of you does is memorializes the terms under which the city will receive its portion of that county funding to provide those services. And then also, as part of this IGA, the city is agreeing to act as sort of a middleman between the county and the Canby Center so that the city can receive funds from the county that the county has allocated to the Canby Center and then pass those funds along to the Canby Center as grant funds. This process took a little bit of, structuring the agreement in certain ways so that, one, it could stay in intergovernmental agreement, so the Canby Center can't be party to an IGA, otherwise it would no longer be an IGA. And then also so that the city wouldn't be in a position where it has to go through, a burdensome procurement process as if it was giving the Canby Center money under contract to provide those services. So by structuring it as an IGA just between the city and the county, and then bringing grant funds as part of that IGA to then pass through to the Canby Center, we are, taking advantage of the county's generous funding opportunity and then helping the Canby Center do the same. So I'm very appreciative of all the county staff that I've worked with for a bit now, including an assistant county counsel to put this together and get it in front of you today. Our hope is that we get a motion to approve, to authorize Eileen to sign this IGA, and we can get that going and get staff in the Canby Center the money it needs to provide these really great services. And I'll take questions if there are any.
Are there any questions or thoughts? Yes, Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard stories from neighboring communities who've had county funds come in. While well-intentioned, it kind of has unintended consequences of basically drawing more homeless more problems. What is your feeling on that potential happening here?
So I'm not sure. I am not sure what this money is going to look like operationally. My understanding is that the Canby Center is going to use, and I can't, officially speak for the Canby Center, but looking at them first, my understanding is the Canby Center is going to use this to fund their existing services, so existing clientele. And the Canby Center has a really great mission too. You should read that one of these times.
I'm very familiar with their service.
Okay,
but
very good.
Yeah, I wasn't questioning their mission. I was just
Right. So
questioning whether or not this might attract.
Yeah, as for the city, I'm not sure. I know that the services that the city is proposing to provide with this money include things like assisting with financial literacy, for example, helping with, computer skills, that sort of thing. I believe there's a, for the police department specifically, it will be used to purchase equipment needed to help monitor and ensure safety in certain public areas. So like lights and audio, video equipment.
Okay.
So all that to say, I can't directly answer your question, but.
Okay. Thank you for your attempt at it.
Anytime.
Okay. I want to provide a little bit more information on that. So for the library, as Emily said, it is paying for services and programs such as literacy, resume writing, those types of job skills. And then for the police department, it's paying to install security lighting and cameras for the parking lot designated out there northeast of the movie theater, which is the area designated for sanctioned camping by people experiencing homelessness per city ordinance. But it's also paying for the agreement that the city has with the city of Molalla on the behavioral health specialist. So I know they've been waiting for that.
So this is part of that piece.
This
that
is
we've been
part of that piece.
Anxiously waiting for. Okay,
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
helps. Thank you. Okay.
Councilor Patton?
I move to authorize the city administrator to execute the IGA between the city of Clackamas County. That seems like it's missing information. Is this the correct motion?
The city of Clackamas County.
The city of Canby.
The city and Clackamas County?
The city and yeah, we're missing a word.
Okay. Apparently that's the correct motion. Is there a? I'm on page 138 of our packet. It says recommended motion. I move to authorize the city administrator to execute the IGA between the city and Clackamas County.
Second.
And if I may, I wholeheartedly support this. The Canby Center does a fantastic job of helping those in our community that need a leg up. And anytime we are able to help dig people who are less fortunate and out of poverty, I think that it is a service well rendered to the city. And so therefore, I am very much excited to vote yes on this.
Okay. The motion has been made by Councilor Patton and second by Councilor Davis to approve the IGA between the city and Clackamas County for homeless services funding. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 6-0. Thanks, Emily. Item B, IGA with Clackamas County transferring jurisdiction of Pine Street. Mr. Pollack, how are you?
Good. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is an IGA to take over the road authority for North Pine Street. We kind of came back with a slightly better offer than what was the paper napkin from last time. So they're offering us $513,000 for the 2-inch overlay and replacement of ADA ramps along that stretch of North Pine Street.
More from the county is better.
It's
And
always
I know
good.
that this has been a long time project for us as a city to get those jurisdictions and whatnot. It's been slow, but we're getting them, so that's good.
I think that this is the last one that is a full street inside both sides, so
Yes.
it's pretty exciting.
No, and thank you for, the streets team and, our public works director and staff to get that tightened up and get it done, so thank you. It's been, like I said, it's been a long time coming, and I would rather we do it, because most people, a road is a road is a road, whether it's Canby or not, and so it gives us the ability to do what we need to do to fix it and make it right, so I appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there questions?
No, Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the authorized,
No, Counselor Patton, I think.
No,
you
it's
do.
all right, let her do it, it's fine.
No, go ahead. Sorry. Didn't know we had a patent on it. Go ahead.
No,
I
was-
move to adopt authorizing the city administrator to sign an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Canby and Clackamas County related to the transfer of jurisdiction over a portion of North Pine Street.
Second.
Anytime the county is willing to give us money, I say we take it and run.
Yes.
Motion has been made by Counselor Patton and seconded by Counselor Waterman to approve the IGA with Clackamas County. Sorry, wrong one. IGA with Clackamas County transferring jurisdiction of Pine Street to the City of Canby. Any further question or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 6-0. Next up is under old business is an IGA with Clackamas County relating to the storm drainage maintenance on portion of Southeast First Avenue, Southeast 13th Avenue, and Malino Road.
So this one is really similar to the last one that you guys just did, is this one is kind of preemptively trying to allow the county to have developers build to our standards on future roads that we believe will become ours that are currently county roads. So the county's kind of excited for it because then they don't have to pay us more later for us to take it over. And it's already built to our design standards and ready to go for the city's crew.
Teamwork with the county.
Little teamwork.
Oh, it's amazing how that's worked out. It's only taken us a little time to get there, but we got there.
A little bit.
Okay. Are there any questions before a motion is made? Okay, I will take a motion. Yes.
I move to adopt authorizing the city administrator enter an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and the City of Canby relating to storm drainage maintenance on portions of Southeast First Avenue, 13th Avenue, and Malino Road. Second.
Motion is made by Counselor Waterman and seconded by Counselor Maldonado to approve the IGA with Clackamas County, or between the city and Clackamas County related to the storm drainage maintenance on portion of Southeast First Avenue, Southeast 13th Avenue, and Malino Road. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 6-0. Thank you, Spencer, appreciate it. Moving into new business, topic tonight, council reserve policy. I believe that's Eileen.
That is me. So council, last week was the first meeting of the Budget Committee to review the city administrator's proposed budget. The leadership team worked diligently to make this budget as realistic and accurate as possible, and to place the city of Canby in the best possible fiscal position, given that there are uncertainties in the budget still, as we discussed a little earlier. The leadership team unanimously agreed to recommend strategic cuts and to avoid reductions in force, and did so by reducing the general fund strategic reserve to 15%, in recognition that this was a bridge year, as the city would be receiving an extra $1 million per year in revenue beginning fiscal year 26-27. Also fueling this decision is the fact that the level of strategic reserves is estimated to be as high as 42% when you consider actuals, as opposed to budgeted amounts. So the Budget Committee felt that the City Council should make that decision on its level of strategic reserve first. If you do increase it back to 20%, that results in an extra $678,000 in cuts. Department directors are working on those and will be prepared to review those tomorrow after we get through the rest of the non-general fund funds. So this budget contains no, this budget that was proposed last week contains no reductions in force. Again, unanimous position by the leadership team to try to avoid those as much as possible because of the impacts on people and their families and their incomes and all of that. But we recognize that that is the council's decision, and we will do what we need to do in order to comply with the will of the council. So the Budget Committee felt that decision needed to be made by the City Council, not the Budget Committee, and that's why this item is on tonight's agenda.
Thank you for that.
I did find that last year, the amount was reduced from 30 to 40% down to 20 to 25%. And originally in 2018, there was a resolution adopting new financial policies that put the 30 to 40% in place back in 2018. So a resolution was not adopted when the amount was changed to 20 to 25%. Probably an oversight on my part to not get that resolution adopted. But like I said, the leadership team felt that going down to 15% and avoiding layoffs would be the better way to go.
Yes, Councilor Stearns.
I just have just a clarification before we start talking about this so that people out there know what we're talking about. So when we talk about the reserve, we're saying a percentage of the money that is coming in, and correct me if I'm wrong, is not planned to be spent. Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yeah.
Am I just kind of in layman's terms? So what we're trying to decide tonight is that, and I'm going to give you the wrong number on purpose, but if we had $1 million and we had a 40% reserve, then we would only plan on spending $600,000. Okay, that's just, I just wanted to talk that, make sure we're all clear what we're actually saying when we say we want a reserve of X amount.
And the language is of operating revenues. So you take 15% or 20 to 25% of operating revenue.
Yeah.
So that's 20 to 25% of the operating revenue, but that's not taking into account funds that are starting the balance of the account at the beginning of the year. So it's 20% of the operating, but there's actually more money in the operating fund, in the actual fund itself, right?
That is correct.
And that's where the larger 40, like you said, probably 42% comes, includes all that.
Yeah.
So the 42% does come from the amount that is operating revenue and what is considered our available ending fund balance. So we're calculating that 20% at what it takes to operate the city, and then we look at to see what our ending fund balance is, and that needs to be 20%, minimum 20 to 25%. So once we reach that threshold, then theoretically what happens is that starts our next year as our beginning fund balance when we're going through a budget process. Does that answer your question?
All right, and then the following year, that when we look at the 20% of the reserves, that's still talking about the forecasting of the actual operating budget for the next year, not including the carryover.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
So you always start with your beginning fund balance. We'll always take in our operating revenues. We'll always look at our expenses. The calculation excludes that beginning fund balance, however, and transfers, because those aren't considered operating revenues. Transfers equal, they should equal, so their ins and outs are to zero. And then you don't include your beginning fund balance in your operations.
So if their beginning fund balance is considered a revenue going into the year, correct? So, I mean, ending fund balance, so the 42% ending fund balance is part of the revenue, operating revenue of the following year, if I'm not mistaken.
No, the 42% is still a calculation of your ending fund balance to the operating revenue.
Okay, but that amount, that dollar amount, not the percent, but the dollar
amount
is going to go as a revenue into the.
Up to the top as a starting point.
Into the next year's budget.
As our
So
starting
that
point.
when you're saying 15% or 20% or whatever number we decide, you're saying that includes what our projected ending fund balance will be. So the
No.
fact that we overdid it this year, it is already baked into the budget next year. Is that correct? Am I?
Theoretically, yes, that's correct, because we projected to end at 4.7 million this, when it comes to 6/30. We're projecting that our beginning balance would be right around the 4.8 because of the additional other reserves that we have for like the turf, PEG, and there is a restricted one PEG is restricted, and then we have workers' comp. So all those combined go back up to the top, and that is our beginning number that we start with. So it just kind of is cyclical, it just kind of continues to do that. What's our
Yeah,
end goes to top.
I'm just saying, yeah, the fact that we didn't, so I just want to make sure I'm clear. The fact that we didn't spend everything that we budgeted for in the current year is part of the projections for next year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
It's
we're
our
not saying-
residual, right?
We're not saying that, oh, there's a extra bump up that we're not accounting for in the budget. That bump up is already accounted for in the
No.
budget. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Yes, Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I have a question. There was a policy set by the city council, not for you, Scott, a policy set by the city council to maintain the reserve account. Is that correct, Eileen?
Yes.
Is policy, then, we're discussing that policy now, which we should have had that discussion before the last budget committee meeting, because you're asking us to make a policy decision tonight. So I apologize to the budget committee members that came to the budget committee without the appropriate budget because of the fact that this council did not authorize the reduction of the reserve account. So there we are. We're here tonight discussing the reserve amount, whether or not we want to reduce that. And as I said at the budget committee meeting, prior councils worked very hard to bring that reserve up. And I think that it's would be inappropriate for us to reduce that reserve account and send back to the budget officer, the city administrator, to produce a budget with the appropriate cuts in order to have a balanced budget and maintaining the current council policy for that reserve account. I think it's only prudent that we maintain that reserve account. We have to have some money in that reserve account in the event of a catastrophic event, a severe recession of some sort, so that we can just maintain the existing services that we currently have enjoyed, and especially prioritizing those services. So I am not in favor of reducing that reserve account and maintaining the current policy.
Yes, Councilor Patton.
A couple things. I'm curious. So are we looking tonight to memorialize or the desire to have a 20 to 25% reserve rather than a 30 to 40% reserve? Because quite frankly, for several years, it has been talked about with a 30 to 40% reserve, that is a lot of money that could be going out into the community and doing good things. And so I feel that a 30 to 40% reserve is tying up money that should be going out into the community. I am much more comfortable with a 20 to 25% reserve. And so if the discussion is memorializing what that reserve amount would be in the form of a resolution either tonight or in the future, I would prefer to see 20%, no more than 25%. So that's where I stand on that. When it comes to the dipping into reserve, I think that unless you have been living under a rock somewhere, the city of Canby is not immune in its budget woes compared to pretty much every other single municipality, school district, county, the state, all of its things in the problems that all of these individuals are facing with their budgets. And I agree with Councilor Davis that the reason the reserve is there is to help weather these storms when they come along. In my opinion, this is one of those storms that the reserve is here to weather. And so I personally, if it means making cuts in some services while still maintaining the correct the current amount of staff, if that means dipping into our reserve sum in order to do that, I am comfortable with that. As far as the city administrator coming to this council to get approval in advance for dipping into that reserve, back when I was first on city council, we had a serious budget crisis on our hands. And we had to lay off staff. I remember sitting up on the dais and having members of city staff parade their families through the chamber. It was a mess. And I would prefer to avoid that. So if dipping into reserve helps avoid that, I am totally for it. Now, what I would expect to see from you, Eileen, and from you, Scott, is a strategic plan as to how we get that reserve from 15% now back up to the 20 to 25% over the course of X number of years. So in my brain, if you were to say this year we're at 15%, next year we might have to go down to 12, but then in year 3 we're back up to 15, in year 4 we're up to 18, in year 5 we're to 20. That sort of trend I could live with. But without that trend, it gives me pause as to where we're going to see ourselves dig ourselves out of this hole. And similar to what other counselors have said, I am not willing to hang my hat on the money coming in from the industrial park sunsetting and that tax money coming in, because it has been spent for other things. Granted, some of it will be able to help fill that hole, but I really would like to see that trend digging out of the hole over the course of a period of time. Now, my last point is, and granted, I will apologize to the citizens that I did not have my head screwed on particularly tight at the first budget committee meeting. If you could not tell from the video, I was a little frazzled and tired. But one of the things that struck me is that it seemed as though some of this information came as a surprise to members of the council and budget committee members. I would like to just draw people's attention to an email that we received from Eileen on April 28th of 2025. So this is a week and a half or more before the budget committee meeting met. It said, Mayor and Council, I wanted to share with you where we are at with fiscal year 25-26 budget. As you know, you've instructed me to develop a general fund budget that has a 20 to 25% unrestricted fund balance. Without labor agreements settled yet, we are at 14.8% currently. The budget still assumes a 5% COLAs. So if we are successful in getting those to come in at a lower rate, we still need to cut an additional $135,000 from the general fund, which gets us to 16.7%, which is the GFOA recommended amount of at least 2 months of regular general fund operating revenue or operating expenditures. The leadership team has already cut their budgets proposals and made some targeted service reductions, such as eliminating business and community grants, reducing travel and training, and other M&S line items. But they are also aware of the need to cut further without impacting FTEs, as the team desired, such as reducing the turf reserve, reducing the general fund operating contingency, replacing one police vehicle rather than two. To achieve 20% reserve levels, we will need to cut into FTE. This is a quote-unquote bridge year, as we expect to have 1 million additional tax increment in fiscal year 26-27 due to the closure of the URA. The next day, we got a second email, "Hi all, just to follow up to yesterday's update. To achieve a 20% unrestricted fund balance, we will need to cut $678,000 from the general fund budget. That's not necessarily FTE, but it's hard to achieve such cuts without at least considering them. Budget committee members, FYI." It was given, this problem was brought to the city council's attention 2.5 weeks before the city budget committee meeting. We could have, and this includes myself, requested a meeting with Eileen and Scott to discuss our concerns in advance of that meeting. And I did not request it, and I assume that nobody else requested such a meeting. What I find fascinating is that we did not request such a meeting for that, but there are other meetings that we can manage to get on the calendar in 2 weeks. So I guess this is egg on my face that if I had have actually done my homework and had have done my job, I should have pressed the mayor and my colleagues on the council to have a meeting in advance to discuss some of these cuts, so that way it didn't come as a surprise to the city staff and directors who showed up to that meeting prepared to tell us where they were at and what cuts they were going to make. So I don't know if other counselors feel the same way as I do, but I apologize for not being prepared at the first budget committee meeting, and I am hoping that we are able to get this back on track. That is all.
If it pleases the council, we do have a comment from David Tate on this topic, who is also one of our budget committee members. So I'd like to give David an opportunity to address the council here. You can go sit down, Scott. Well, I'm sure we'll call you back up, though.
You'll be back. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'm speaking tonight to recommend that the council change its fund balance policy to match the Government Financial Officers Association recommendation of 2 months of regular operating expenses or revenues. In your discussion tonight, I hope that you will address the following question. What specific benefit or benefits do the property taxpayers in Canby receive from an excessive fund balance so much higher than the GFOA recommendation? For the budget year 25-26, the city budget officer communicated a difference between the GFOA recommended level and the 20% policy of about $678,000. What specific benefit do the taxpayers receive from the city holding on to the $678,000 above the GFOA recommended reserve levels? I'm certain that this discussion will include phrases like saving for a rainy day or avoiding the pain of future cuts. But this is why we have a reserve fund. This does not answer the question, why a policy that builds such an excessively high reserve fund? I can only think of one other possible explanation for the council's desire to build an excessively high reserve fund. This reserve fund could be used to pay for some special project that the city cannot pay for in any other manner. In that case, I would encourage you, in the spirit of transparency, that you utilize your own fiscal policy 5 and create a committed fund balance through formal action of the council. That would tell the community exactly what this project is and how much you would like to save to pay for it. In summary, again, I ask that the council clearly explain why it's necessary to hold such an excessively high reserve beyond the recommendations of the Government Financial Officers Association And short of that clear explanation, I would encourage you to adopt the GFOA guidelines as your new policy.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor,
sir.
thank you.
Appreciate that.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I just want to let you know that I have not previously had a conversation with Mr. Tate about anything that he said or I said. So the fact that there was some mirror there is purely coincidental.
I'm sure. Well, we can both read it.
Yeah.
So, yes, Counselor Stearns.
One of these microphones, or I can talk without making hearing me. Okay. So a couple questions that I might have, a couple comments and then maybe an opinion or two from me. But the first question is, we are dropping from a 20 to a 15, and the reason I presume is that expenses are going up and revenues are not keeping pace with that. I know that we are subject to they call it the compression, which means we can't raise property taxes if we want to, and they're very limited, and the expenses are not limited in the same way. The property tax revenues are limited. And so if a 5% of, well, we'll call it a 5% drop, I know that there's more math that goes into it than that, in the reserves for this year is due to that reason, what hope is there that the next year won't produce another 5% drop? Or are we just taking a unpleasant task and trying to put it on to the next person or next council or the next set of employees or whatever that's on there and saying, we were the good guys, we did everything right, but the next person causes the suffering? So that's one question I have. I haven't seen anything that indicates, I mean, it's seen there's going to be an extra $1 million in the budget maybe next year, but also we've seen that a lot of that's already allocated for. So I'm not super confident yet, or it hasn't been made, explained to me how this is not a temporary reduction. And so that would have me hesitate a little bit about reducing the reserves, or if we know that expenses are going to outpace income for the foreseeable future, we need to start making priorities, the bad decisions, as I said in the Budget Council, changing a dirty diaper stinks, but the smell doesn't get any better if you wait longer. And so if those choices need to be done, I'd rather them be addressed now than say, hopefully the budget fairy will come next year and give us extra money. So that's one thing. As far as there is always the question, and I deal with this a lot, counseling with nonprofits, is what is an acceptable reserve fund? In fact, I was struggling with that question on Monday with another organization. There's nothing related to it, but the question is how much of a reserve is necessary? And I can appreciate that we could, if we wanted to, have an 80% budget, but our reserve, but that would mean there's very little we actually spent on the city. We could have no reserve, and that means more money will be spent on the city. And so we have to come up with a policy that takes into account that the expenses are not 100% predictable, and neither are the revenues. So I am currently sort of in favor of keeping the 20% reserve, unless it can be explained to me how the budget fairy will come in next year and rescue us, or that something will come and change the equation on money earned, on money earned or reduced expenses. So I think though I see I guess I can see the point about reducing budget to allow, reducing the reserve to allow for more expenditures. I don't see it right now as something that there's any plan to stop that trend. And I apologize if I'm rambling a little bit, but I would like to see something that says we are not just putting a problem for next year's budget committee that we have to solve. And maybe a plan might include something like, 20% isn't some sacred number to me, but I got to see the trend going better. So maybe something like we start making corrections now, and then maybe do cuts over 2 years rather than 1 year. But I do not want to do no cuts this year and a lot of cuts next year. We got to be able to have people foresee. The citizens will have opportunities to come up with other funding sources that are available, other levies, other options that they could do if they feel like the city services should be increased. But unless we have a secure funding for more money, and then Oregon is an income tax state, so if the economy tanks, income tax tanks. That's the sacrifice Oregon made when they decided to do an income tax versus other forms of collecting revenue. So I don't know if that confused everybody enough.
Stearns, I just want to make a couple of comments on what you said. First of all, it's not a one-time $1 million. It's $1 million per year, and then you add 3% and 3% on top of that. So,
yeah, I realize it's an extra $1 million funding source, but I see a lot of that, at least my understanding is, and I could be wrong, and maybe I could be educated more on that, but isn't that already kind of earmarked for some of the economic development and other things? And maybe if we
it currently is. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's what it is currently. Yeah, $425,000 goes from Urban Renewal District back to the general fund to support economic development. So
we could cut economic development. Right. I mean, obviously, I don't want to say, if I say too specific things, everybody's going to be, but the idea is, I think the council needs to, if the council decides to keep it at 20%, the council also needs to issue, or through the budget process or some other means, some sort of where the council has the priorities for such
exactly.
reductions.
And that was the second point that I wanted to make, is that I don't have that sense of service priorities from you all as policymakers yet. So I don't know if you want me to cut a police officer, or if you want me to cut back police services, if you want me to cut economic development, if you want me to cut back park maintenance. I don't have a sense of your collective priorities. That's the point I was trying to make last week, that my hope was that you would see the wisdom of this bridge year so that we could engage in that kind of collaborative discussion between the department directors and the city council, and that we could collectively arrive at a decision as to what cuts we were going to make. I don't want to see families in here as, either. And that's why we were really trying to, to balance this budget without presuming any reductions in force at all. And we were able to achieve that with a lower.
By using basically, in a sense, a savings account. But whenever you dip into the savings account, that's what savings is there for. So I'm sensitive to that, but you have to have a plan to replenish it. And without a plan to replenish it, dipping into savings account every year is going to go.
And that's my third point. We don't have a plan to replenish it yet, and we need a plan to replenish it as well. So, what is that going to be? We need new revenue. We're not going to cut our way out of this problem. We need new revenue. And is that revenue going to be a police levy? Is it going to be a park levy? Is it going to be a police or public safety fee? Hopefully you also saw the ideas that I sent out this morning with the League of Oregon Cities Revenue Toolkit that advocates different types of revenue sources based on different, not all of those will help us. There are some revenues in there that are really designed for capital projects, for example. But what are we going to do?
Yeah, and just to go on to my own diabolical mind thinking is, when there's an emergency, things get done, but when there's not an emergency, they don't get done. So I'm almost tempted to say, if this feels like it's an emergency, maybe we can, I know we love more meetings, but it's our favorite thing to do here, but to be able to come to some sort of agreement as a council on what our spending priorities are and what our at least plans are to So I'm negotiating, sort of in a sense, what are our plans to get out of it? What are our plans for directing the direction of cuts? And then if we have all that in place, we can obviously, every plan, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, but at least we have something that we can look forward as a way out. But without that, it's just, I'd prefer to let us scramble around a little bit so we can make sure that, because nothing is worse than procrastination, because then you're just like, okay, budget season's over, we're going to go a whole another year, and then boom, thing happens again.
No, we would have to get right back into this right after we put the budget together. We would have to get right back into this because this is going to be a long process.
Yeah.
Of deciding what those service priorities are, deciding what a revenue source might be, putting it out there for the voters or the general public. As you know, our citizens are hurting as well, and there are other fees being increased around the community as well. And so, you can't just say, well, let's just go ahead and enact a public safety fee and expect that nobody's going to come out and protest that you're enacting a public safety fee. So you have to think about those different policy choices, who's going to materialize and who isn't going to materialize. That's a lot of work.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think sooner rather than later. I know the work needs to be done. I just hesitate just saying, let's do it next year.
So before I go to Councilor Waterman and then Councilor Patton and then Council President Hensley, just so that we understand in terms of the budget, general fund items that we're talking about, it's police, parks, library, administrative, cemetery. Those are the main funds of the general fund.
HR and finance and court. Well, we do have a $325,000 transfer.
So that's part of the not allocated portion of the general fund.
Oh, okay. So not library.
Well, but isn't there the transfer?
There is. It's in the non-allocated portion of the budget.
It's a loan that the library pays interest on, so if anything, it's actually a revenue source to the general fund.
Okay.
And it's a very small percentage of the general fund.
Yes. Councilor Waterman and then Councilor Patton.
I struggle to understand the concept of we have an emergency fund. We all sit around and agree that we're in hard times, and then to say, but since things are going down, we can't use it because we don't know if it's going to go down more. I don't understand the concept of that. That's kind of the whole point of what we're doing. Yes, we need to have a plan going forward. As has been mentioned, we don't have revenue. The revenue's not there, but it's also our jobs as the policymakers to find the revenue and to be creative and to look at those options. Going from 20% to 15%, we're not asking to go and deplete the fund. We're talking about 15%, which is basically right around, as been mentioned, the national average of a normal fund. 50%, 16.7% is a healthy fund, according to GFOA. So we're not talking about going down to 5%. If I was going to say 5% from 20 to 15%, and we don't have to cut staff, and we agree to put in the hard work over the next year to make sure we find revenue, we streamline, we get more efficient, to me, that is a better option than to say, well, we're just going to cut people and hope that we can still figure something out next year, because we're going to need those people next year too. So that's my thought process on that.
Thanks, sir. Councilor Patton and then Council President Hensley.
So I will say this, if, so something else that we need, something else that adds into this is, we got our update on our attorney services. And, in this graph, and this is public record, it's in the packet, there is a purple line drawn at just over $20,000 a month. Because about $20,000 a month is what the city would pay for a full-time city attorney. And over the last 3 months, we have been well over that. In fact, in January, it was almost $28,000. In February, it was almost $37,000. And likewise, it is projected to be about that for this month. So when it comes time to talk about saving money, you can bet, and I made this very clear when we move forward with doing contract attorney services, that if it meant fiscal responsibility and savings to the city by contracting those out, I'm fine with not having a city attorney on staff. But the trend is not going that way. And so if we are talking about saving money, I will, if this continues, I am going to start beating the drum that we hire a full-time city attorney to do the day-to-day mundane things, and then continue forward with our contract with Barry Elsner and Hammond for specialty items so that we make sure that we're covered. I am planting that seed now for later. The other thing is that, and this is why at the budget committee meeting, Counselor Waterman was like, hey, you're talking about sending the budget back, but you're not giving parameters. Like, what is the parameters? And that's why I said the parameters I would like to see are 5, 10, and 15% cuts from every single department that this touches. That is what I'm expecting to come back to the city budget committee meeting tomorrow. Information about this. And I can tell you right now that I will look and I will advocate for those cuts to be made relatively evenly among all departments. There is not one department that should bear the burden more percentage-wise than others. So when it comes to talking about police and parks and streets and all of those things, I am going to be looking across the board evenly. Because it will not be fair for one or two departments to bear the brunt of that pain over one or two other departments. And in my opinion, one of the ones that will be off the table is the cemetery, because we are already screwed there. We are already going to be in trouble there because there's not any amount of money that we can put away now that will fund that cemetery for until either, the bomb drops or we all just disappear. So that's some more about where I stand on all of that.
Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few things. One, I'm really getting tired of hearing the word bridge year, because this isn't a bridge year. That I'm with Councilor Patton. We cannot hang our hat on this urban renewal fund sunsetting and saving the day when it's already earmarked for things. As far as the GFOA, I have just as much faith in that as any other government agency or NGO. We're all taught to save 3 months of expenses in our own personal budgets, so that's what we should be doing here. 20 to 25% is what it is currently. Earlier, maybe he misspoke, but Councilor Patton said we could reduce it to 20 and 25 and he'd be comfortable. We're already there. We don't need to reduce it. I want to keep it at the 20 to 25. Reducing it to 15% is irresponsible, especially since it was brought to us without a plan for recovery. There were no alternatives to consider. It was just, here you are, it's 15%. I did see the email. Unfortunately, that email came in on the day my brother died, so I didn't see it until the next day, but I also got the update. And I read that to mean reducing FTEs that might need to be considered. I honestly read that to mean you were considering it and you were handling it. So I didn't answer the email. I thought you had it. So I'm disappointed that the budget came to us without alternatives to consider. And good alternatives would be what Councilor Patton had suggested, a 5%, 10%, 15% cut. And I agree, across the board, no one budget line should have to bear the whole brunt of this. But I'm absolutely not for reducing the reserve. We're just kicking the can down the road if we do.
I just want to clarify. I think where I was coming from of the reducing it to 20 or 25%, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the questions is that currently the policy is 30 to 40%.
It's 20 to 25 on policy 5 in the book.
Oh.
That's in the book, but the resolution,
But the resolution is in-
was never changed.
The resolution, as she said in her email, the resolution was to change it to 20 to 25, but the second piece of that, the trigger point for a plan, was still left at 30.
That's not,
Well,
Right.
see,
there was
that's,
never a
yeah, she's-
resolution to change it to 20, 25%.
There was not a resolution.
Correct.
That's correct.
so that,
Okay.
that's
It
what
was-
I'm saying is I think one of the things that we need to do is if we want to target the 20 or 25%, that either, like at the next meeting, we really should clean up the house and do a resolution to memorialize that, to remove that confusion for the future.
And there should be, I mean, if you're gonna go the 20 to 25, I guess I can live with a range like that, but we need a hard point of, you hit this number, we better have a damn plan, pardon my French. We need a plan to replenish and recover. So what is that number gonna be? If we're 20 to 25, when we hit 22, we make a plan? I would like to know what that number is.
Well, before it was 30 to 40%, anything less than 30 was the plan. So
So 20% we have a plan.
Anything less than 20 would be the plan.
Okay.
If we followed the same process.
Counselor Stearns?
Yeah. More unpopularity opinions probably what I want to make right now, but I sort of, and a few weeks ago, a couple things, and I've heard also in other departments is something happening which seems to be very, I would say, short-sighted. And I understand the city work environment is different than the private work environment, and I know that my suggestions may not be very popular, but one thing I noticed, and this is just because it was presented in detail to the city council, I'm using it as an illustration, not as a criticism, but when the library was talking, and I brought it up in the library meeting as well, it seems like they were in the habit of replacing, because of budget cuts, they were cutting low-cost labor, the pages in this case, and making high-cost employees do low-cost work. Also, my understanding, which I heard from another source, maybe I can confirm if I'm wrong, but this summer they're not doing the program where they would get interns to help out with some of the parks and work. And that's another example of trading low-cost labor and having high-cost labor do the low-cost work. And in a sort of an accounting point of view, that really doesn't make a lot of sense. You want to have, if you have labor that can be performed by lower cost, you want to utilize that heavily and leave the higher cost people to do the higher, more sophisticated things that the higher cost people should have to do. I mentioned this to Eileen and we're talking to her one-on-one, so it's not a surprise to her that I have this opinion. But I want to, but I think that there are probably options out there that aren't really being considered either because the structure of city public is not suited for that. But I think we should try to work on ways of doing smart financial decisions with personnel. And I know I have to be as specific as I can get without getting in trouble. But it just, the accountant in me looks at that, it doesn't make sense. Because one of the things with budgeting and everything, and that's what we're kind of talking around today, is the biggest cost, and this is a service organization, the biggest cost is labor. And that's, and so how you allocate that labor and that cost is the biggest way of affecting finances. And that has to do everything with compensation, deferred compensation, all these things have a price tag on it. And I would really like to see something that, at least from my financial mind, makes a little more sense when it comes to these costs. Now, like I know with personnel and stuff, I can't be any more specific than that, but I would like to see some sort of effort to be able to better allocation of labor cost. We'll just put it that way.
Okay, so is there I think the crux of the question here then, just to bring it back to the agenda item, was about the reserve policy and staying with the budget as it is, that amount was brought down to 15. And so I guess what is the council's direction? Is the council's direction for staff to go back and the minimum being 20 and therefore make the adjustments?
I think our hard stop should be at 20%. I think our hard stop should be at 20%.
25.
Yeah, and I agree with Councilor Patton. We need the directors to come back with cuts across the board evenly.
Okay. Councilor Davis and then Councilor Patton.
Thank you, Mayor. For my colleagues, in my prior employment, I had to live this, where when I came in there, they were at about $1 million deficit, and it was caused by the recession. And when you have to take out a loan to pay to keep the city operating, you're going to pay a very high interest rate when that happens. And so, I never want to see that happen to the city, what we had to endure by paying back a trans loan and bringing back up the reserve account to $1.8 million in a very short period of time. And so that's why I live this. I know what it's like if you don't do forecasting. And as Jason had mentioned too, is how do we replenish that reserve? We have to identify that. We don't have a crystal ball to actually look at what's going to happen next year or the year after. If the economy turns around and we are able to do that, then certainly let's revisit that reserve account. But I think it's so important that other councils have lived this as well and the mayor have lived this, where they're trying to build back up the reserve account. And I would hate to see that drop below the 20%. I think it's incumbent as a budget officer, a prior budget officer, I had to make some very tough decisions when it came to that. It wasn't my board's position. They expected me to come up with the recommendations to the board on what reductions we were going to make in order to balance that budget. Yes, input from the city council is important in regards to how each one of us feels towards priorities within the city. But I would hate to see that drop below the 20% minimum. I personally like the existing policy, but could live with reducing that down to 20%. Thank you.
So the question is, are we asking a resolution to come back to us then to actually memorialize this? Because we don't have a resolution before us. Are we just going by consensus, or what are we doing here tonight on this budget or this agenda item?
Well, wouldn't we be directing the budget officer to prepare a budget for not to drop below 20% reserve?
But we also will need a resolution in the future.
Correct.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
And I have that noted, and so does Eileen.
So one more.
So what I'm hearing you, go ahead, Councilor Stern.
If I could just say, I'm kind of with everybody on the 20%. I haven't been convinced by any data that it will be temporary. And it doesn't mean it won't be temporary. It just means I haven't been convinced, which means if you want to convince me, you have to do a better job. But the idea is, what my point is I do not like the idea of cutting every department equal percentage amount, because I don't think the citizens that I talk to think that every department has equal value. And it's a hard thing for me to say that, but I think that but to say across the board in the sense of fairness, fair to who? Fair to the city, fair to the citizens. I think a lot of citizens have higher priorities than another, and it's our responsibility, if we are kind of going to have a budget that cuts personnel, that we as a council stand up and say, this is where the cuts go, and we're going to own it as a council, not, and I recognize, I appreciate saying that the budget officer is supposed to do most of that work, but when a hard decision needs to be made, I don't want to blame it on somebody else. I want to blame it on myself and say, look, I know I'm saying something that's hard, I know it's difficult, and I'm not going to say it's Paul's fault.
Mayor, that's where I'd be looking at the budget committee. It's up to the budget officer to present a budget, and then the budget committee provides input back, which is us as well.
Correct. But also
At the
citizens,
budget
they can
committee.
give their priority opinions too. Yeah.
Councilor Patton.
So based on what I'm hearing, we are directing Eileen to come up with $678,000 in cuts from the budget.
Correct.
Currently?
Correct.
That is the directive.
Yep. Number.
Okay, and I will just tell you right now that, to your point, Counselor Stearns, if we show up at that budget committee,
And that's the general fund,
that's in the general fund.
just the general
Just the
fund.
general fund.
Right.
If we show up at that budget committee meeting and we cut from streets and we cut from parks and we cut from a little bit from library and we cut from the cemetery and we cut from everything and the police is not touched, I'm going to lose it, okay? Everybody needs to bear some of this burden. I'm sorry, Chief Tro, but if that's the case, that's the directive. That's the hard decisions we're gonna make. And that is going to have to touch police because I can already see it happening. Everybody is gonna have to get touched. Every department is going to get touched.
So every department may get touched, but that doesn't mean, I think there has to be some negotiation going on where not every department has to be touched as much because there are budgets out there that are fractions of other budgets.
Yeah.
And those departments, you can argue, provide different value to customers or to our constituents that are on a daily basis and right now type of services. So I think the point of the budget committee is there has to be some negotiation go on as well.
And the citizen, and it's not a question of every department. It's fair. The city exists to provide services to the citizens. And it's not a question of what's fair, like so-and-so feelings got hurt or this kind of thing, or it's not fair to one department or another. We're talking about what is fair to the citizens of Canby, and that's a decision we need to make. And I kind of respect your saying that if one department doesn't get touched, it looks like it's not fair. But if one department doesn't get touched, and we as a council decide that one department doesn't get touched, then that's our decision to make. And so I want to say that we as a council make those decisions and not say, well, we told them to cut equally from everybody and that's it. We have to look people and say, we maybe have less police officers. And if something happens and we have to say, well, I made that decision to cut the police officer. Or if there's a library has to shut down hours and the citizen comes to me, even though the library's not part of this, but I'm just giving an example. Then somebody says, well, I made that decision, or city offices have to be closed an hour early, and I have to say, I made that decision, and I decided that, or we as a group did, but I have to say, I have to own it and say we did it. So the whole idea of, let's be fair to this department or that department, for me, that's not how it works in my personal life, and that's not how it works, I think, in most people's lives. We have to make decisions on what our priorities are.
So I'll come to you in just a second, Councilor Maldonado. So Aileen, knowing that this conversation was coming up this evening, what work has already been done and what is being prepared to present to the budget committee for tomorrow night?
There is
this conversation.
There is a list of cuts that department directors have been asked to make. So I don't have that with me right now, but as the departments present their budgets, they will go through that list of cuts and propose those further. I will tell you, the departments again decided not to lay off anybody. So they are further reductions in materials and services, and there are no layoffs no layoffs proposed.
Okay. Councilor Maldonado, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about it, and, you know, my previous statement where it should be equal across the board was absolutely dumb. They don't, each department doesn't get an equal amount of money. If you try to take 15% out of 1,000 and 15% out of 20,000, it's going to be so unlevel. And the first thing, and the last people you want to start cutting from is your police.
Well, when we are replacing police cars because the undercarriage is ripped out from the potholes, and people or kids are falling out of swings because they're breaking because the parts can't be maintained, then I guess we'll have to talk to the citizens about that. And we'll have to see how that impacts the budget. I mean, I've said my piece, you will do what we need to do.
I'm not saying that every department shouldn't feel a little bit of the strain. Tightening belt hurts. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna be uncomfortable. But that's the whole point, is we come together with a plan, an actual logistical plan that makes sense.
Eileen, do you feel you've got the direction you need from the council?
I do.
Council, do you feel that you've delivered the direction to staff?
Should we take a vote, so it's all on record that we, as a council, resolve that the budget, the reserves be 20%?
Well,
Does it make it clear? I mean, I don't know if we have to, but maybe 2 years from now, they say, well, there was no resolution.
we have a
Councilor-
resolution that needs to be drafted first.
Councillor Hensley, I wanted to address, we don't have options identified right now. Everybody has
I'm
made.
sorry, I can't hear you.
We don't have options identified right now. Everybody has made a 12% reduction. And that's what you will see tomorrow.
Okay. Can I ask one question? Is there a reason why we couldn't have done the 5, 10, 15 options like Councilor Patton suggested last week?
I can ask the department directors to prepare a 15% reduction as well. But we felt that
15% reduction and everybody's in the general fund's budget?
To the table, please. Sorry, to the microphone.
Yeah, to the microphone.
Yeah, a 15% reduction at everybody's budget that touches the general fund, we would get to that $678,000 very quickly.
Okay.
Like Chief Tro's budget, at 15%, he'd be looking at. Thank you.
Oh, so what?
So we'd be getting there really fast if we did a 5, 10, 15. So what the assignment that we all started looking at was reducing everybody's budget that touched the general fund by 12%. That gets us to 20%.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
And we're in the exercise of that now, and we're about right there. But that's where the presentation would be. Here's the general fund director over this, and here's what we had to cut based on where we started and where we're ending up, that's presenting to get you to that 20% that's requested.
Okay, but to Councilor Stern's point, maybe some departments don't need to be hit quite as hard. Yes, everybody needs to feel it, but that's why, at least I might be wrong on what Councilor Patton was thinking, but when he offered that idea of options, my brain was going, what does 5% look like here? What does 10% look like here? Maybe some can shoulder a little more, can afford to shoulder a little bit more of the burden than another department. That's kind of why I was wanting to see the options, so.
Yeah, building can't afford to lose anything. If you look at their M&S, it's like $1,000.
Right, and
That's
that's-
impossible. So planning would try to help alleviate some of that. There's another that's not a part of the general fund, but has a direct effect to the general fund. They reduced some of their capital outlay, so that required less of a transition to pay back to that fund. It's an internal service fund, an internal charge fund. So that reduces some of the internal charges to the general fund. So there are other funds that are taking a little bit of a hit, but in general, to get us to where we needed to be, that was the task that we presented to every director, was how can we cut at least 12% from this budget, this budget, this budget, this budget, knowing not allocated fund could not be touched because there's really nothing in that one either. Building doesn't have anything. So it was really those that just had something to give.
Okay.
so
Councilor Patton, go ahead.
to that point then, if what we are going to be presented with tomorrow night gets to essentially the 20% that we are looking for, then the 5, 10, 15% is a moot point for me. If what you're going to present says this gets us into 20%. But where the homework then comes from us as a council is we need to dig in and we need to start to identify other revenue sources, because it is not going to be feasible for all these departments to operate with that 12% cut or more every year. So that is going to be, if what we get tomorrow night shows 20% reserve, then the hard work starts for us to figure out where we start to build that up.
And our spending priorities.
And your spending priorities, yes.
Yes, Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Not getting in too much into tomorrow night, but I got to tell you, I'm not in support of any new positions. I don't care if they're grant positions or not, because if we don't get that grant the following year, then we've got this employee on with benefits and everything else. And that's a smoke and mirrors thing in regards to the fact of, and I can't understand why we need a transit police officer on a bus that's empty. You know, I mean, come on. It's not fair. And then you know, hiding and moving what was supposed to be a park position over to wastewater for Dodd's addition. Essentially, that position wasn't there, but that was a new position. Okay, that's 2 new positions. And how many other new positions have we put on in the last year? We've put on way too many positions. So we shouldn't even be here talking had we managed positions and how many new positions we've had to put on. So I'm going to be very vocal about no new positions in this next year budget.
Yes, Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur. I kind of thought we already had that message sent, but it must have gotten lost. But also, I agree that we need to identify revenue sources and whatnot, Councilor Patton, but also that's the budget officer's job. So I would look for Eileen to bring us proposals of what she thinks as the budget officer. These are good options for us to choose from and approve, rather than us doing the heavy lifting on trying to go through an LOC toolkit and decide what we should be charging our citizens. I would like to see a proposal from the administration.
But I guess to that point, isn't that the policy part of our jobs? We're voted in to set policy, and it's for the city administrator to give us the options that we have to create that policy and generate that revenue, but it's not up to the city administrator to dictate to us.
Well, you're right,
what
but
that
I would
is.
like to hear her recommendations is what I'm saying.
And that's all well and good. This is an initial recommendation, but when it comes down to it, if it's going to be a public safety levy, it's going to be an overlay to the library district, it's going to be an overlay to the transit district or something along those lines, then that's on us. That the buck stops here, not there.
Right, we would have to vote to put those things to the citizens anyway on some of those things, a levy or whatnot. But I'm just saying, rather than, here's a laundry list of things that exist, I would like to hear the recommendation that the administrator feels is best for this situation, and then we can go from there.
Did you receive the other piece of that?
Yeah, I had my printed out.
Okay.
For me, 'cause
Yeah.
on the computer, I don't.
No, that's okay.
Very well.
But the other sheet was different ideas that you could consider. So that, that is my recommendation right now. Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else regarding this? Emily, it seems that we have a consensus piece on this. Do we need an official motion on the direction given? Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, I would do a motion since this is, the policy is in place officially via resolution, so a motion should do it.
Well, we don't have the
Resolution for what?
resolution.
So do you currently have an active resolution that says that your reserve balance should be 30 to 40%? Am I following that right?
That's the current one.
So
yes.
if you want to change that, we need an official council action. So are you asking, oh, you're asking?
I'm asking about just
We'll
for
bring
the
it.
interim, so for our current budget year, that the direction from the council right now is to move the reserve, make sure that the rainy day reserve fund is at 20%, not at 15 for this current budget. We will have to bring a full resolution back to the council,
Right.
memorializing that basement 20%.
I understand. Yes, that's fine.
So just a consensus right now of where we're at is,
Yep, consensus
fine
to
for-
bring the proposed budget forward, meeting that 20%, and the official policy change to be memorialized at the next council meeting.
great, perfect. Thank you, Emily. All right, we moving on, everyone? Okay, moving forward, mayor's business, just a couple of things, nothing. Region 1 Area Commission on Transportation is meeting next month. The Clackamas County Coordinating Committee meeting, I was not able to attend, so hopefully Council President Hensley will be able to add to that. I just wanted to yell out a couple of congratulations to the Canby High School Choir and the dance team for their successes at their state competitions this year. Great job. Budget committee meetings. So we have our second budget committee meeting tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. and then our third one on May 29th at 6 p.m. So if you're enthralled by the conversation you heard this evening, please come to that meeting and let us know what your thoughts are. That's all that I have right now. We'll go into councilor comments and liaison reports. We'll start with Councilor Patton.
I don't have any major updates. I will just say that as part of our citizen input today, I was a little struck by the comment about us not filling out our review forms properly. That was done during executive session, and I would be curious as to why that information is part of a public comment. That is it.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Maldonado?
Nothing to report at this time.
Okay, Council President Hensley.
Nothing to report. I do want to thank the several citizens that have reached out to me over Facebook messengers. Just want to thank everybody for reaching out to me in the loss of my brother. So thank you for being such a wonderful, caring community, and I'll have a more robust report next time.
Okay, Councilor Davis?
Thank you, Mayor. Condolences to the Canby Police Department on the loss of Police Sergeant Farmer. That is very hard. I've worked with Sergeant Farmer in the past. He will be missed. So Chief Troll, pass that on to your police officers if you would. Congratulations for those people that won their elections, especially locally on our school board. And thank you to all those that signed up for those positions. You know, I just wanted to congratulate those people. And Tracy, my condolences to you on the loss of your brother too. That's hard. The Park and Rec Committee, we had an excellent presentation. Dawn Hardy was there with FCS, the consulting firm, who went through the various impact fees for different types of impact fees by city and what those costs would be. Those, of course, will come back to the city council when we, I think June 4th is when we get together to talk about impact fees again. But we had some comparisons of Wilsonville, Lake Oswego, Oregon City, Sandy, Sherwood, that all that information will be presented by the consulting firm at our June 4th meeting. And then the consulting firm, after the work session with the city council on June 17th, will go back to the Park and Rec Committee for their input as well. Dodds Addition Park hopefully will be starting sometime, Spencer said sometime around August, September, or something like that. I know that neighborhood is looking forward to that getting started. So I know that there's a bid process and everything else that Spencer's going through to get that put out to bid and stuff, so that's great. I was taken back a little bit in regards to Maple Street Park. I know that the council talked about the parking that needed to be, the parking lot that needed to be put in, which was a safety item. And we continue to have, that is a very busy park for tournaments and things like that. But apparently that parking and play structure was in this year's budget and has been taken out of this year's budget. My understanding of what I heard last night at the Park and Rec Committee. That concerns me because, especially with the parking issue, that's a huge safety issue out on Maple Street Park, Maple Street, with people trying to park there. So that was supposedly moved to the 20-year list for park maintenance fees, which means it probably wouldn't happen for a couple of years to get that playground equipment moved, as well as the additional parking put in. So I'll have to bring back some information to the committee on that as well. And then there was discussion around the policy for the park maintenance fee that was under public comment tonight in regards to how that is being, whether it's a 60-40, but I asked that that comes back to the council for a policy decision on how that money's spent, because right now it's by an email by staff as far as how that money is being spent. There are some personnel costs as well as costs for materials and services, and nobody seems to know how much money is in those accounts for being able to move forward with whether it's asphalting up at Legacy Park or maintenance things that fund is intended for. Then we also talked about the Feist property that is in the Feist edition, the potential for what that property could be used for, and it was recommended that we hold a public forum to ask the neighbors in Feist edition as far as what they would like to see that property used for. And then a person also asked about the railroad property. Everybody will recall that Kathy Ray Smith and the Garden Club basically worked very hard to put in a lot of vegetation along the railroad, and the railroad insisted that it be taken out, so it's been taken out. But right now, nobody's maintaining it, whereas before it was being maintained by this committee. And ODOT apparently had a permit that expired that allowed that maintenance to be done along the railroad property, but then the railroad insisted that a lot of that vegetation be taken out. That had a lot of volunteer hours put in order to plant that stuff. So I was wondering if we could contact the railroad and see if we could find out somebody from the railroad that we would talk to about that railroad, as well as ODOT, because there was some permit that was allowed from ODOT to be able to plan a lot of that stuff, but right now nobody's maintaining it. Yeah, Jason?
So I actually did some advocacy work on behind the scenes trying to salvage that project. And from what I understand, there were members of the committee that were reaching out directly to the railroad, which really riled them up. And it's possible that without some of the pressure that the railroad got, there could have been some salvaging of some of it. But one thing that I have learned as working with the city is that when you poke the badger bites. And so it would be, based on what I have heard, it would probably be best to leave that lay for a little while and then maybe revisit it in a period of time to see if that bridge can be built. But from the sounds of it, not only is the bridge gone, but the foundation's been ripped out at the moment. So I would recommend just letting that dog lie for a little bit.
Yeah, I agree, but there should be a person that we can talk to at the railroad and try to build that relationship back up with the railroad to see what we can do, because, and if there was a permit with ODOT that allowed us to maintain that vegetation along there, maybe we need to talk to ODOT again too, because somebody's got to maintain that. It's already, grass is higher than some of the vegetation, the plants. So, and then under the adult center, again, as everybody knows, the adult center did close on their property at Holly and Territorial. So congratulations to Kathy at the adult center and their board for closing that deal up there. And I know they're very excited about that move. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, sir. Counselor Stearns.
Well, I went to the Canby Utility Board meeting, and I guess there's the way it works, which I think everybody knows, is that some big fat wires come into the substation and they distribute out electricity to all the little wires to people's houses. But it turns out, and other businesses, but it turns out, the way I understand it, is that the big fat wires are not big and fat enough to go and support some of these new projects like the liquor board building and the couple other projects that, so these projects, my understanding, are almost on hold because there's no power supply. Apparently, the big fat wires that come in are controlled by PGE, and PGE, I guess my understanding from the meeting is that they're a slow, deliberative sort of company that doesn't make fast decisions. And so they thought that it might be useful maybe for them to draft a letter and have the mayor give some political pressure to help PGE make a decision to bring bigger, fatter wires or more of them into the substations. So and that's my take on what's going on there. But that was kind of the ask from the utility board maybe to the city to help figure out ways of persuading PGE to do that.
So to your point, Counselor Stearns, yes, I have been in contact with Canby Utility. Yes, I have offered a joint letter from both Canby Utility and the city to PGE, specifically to CEO Maria Pope, about this issue, because we do have a number of projects that would potentially not happen, and they're all the ones that we have that could possibly end up on hold are economic drivers for the city. So yes, we are already working on drafting said letter.
Okay, so I just thought I'd bring that up because that was, plus they started doing some studies on the Fur and 4th Street water tank decoration we have out there right now.
Are they going to paint it for you?
So that was one thing. The second thing comes up, and I was been thinking a lot about the parks fee, and I guess the issue is we know how much we're coming in because whenever we get a check from the parks fee, we know where it comes from. But and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Scott. But then we don't quite know where the money is spent, and I would suspect the reason would be that when something is spent on the parks, we don't have a way of identifying whether that particular pile of fertilizer was from the street maintenance fund or from some other source. So there's no fund segregation going on in that, if I'm stating the problem correctly. So you can't just pull a report and say, this is how much we spent with the park maintenance funds. And so having in a past life written accounting software and having dealt with many in my life, I know that problem is often solved by some sort of code or something that you would input when you were writing the check out. Then maybe you have to even actually split it, like, okay, here's, what?
It's happening now.
Okay, so I guess, so if it's already starting to happen, we should have a report available within, yeah, Mike, why don't you say, I was just thinking about it, yeah, come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I want to address the complaint, let me make sure.
So all of the parks' revenues and expenditures are all by a line item, and they all have their individual GL code, general ledger code. And so to satisfy the request that's come in, my team and I basically think that the best way to do it is just to give the requester all GL detail for the years that we actually have, because we do have years we can't go back and get because they've been purged. So we can't go as far back as the request has been, but that's something that I think Maya has been trying to work with the requester on. And so we're taking the steps, but any amount that comes in is under a specific GL code for that parks. Anything that goes out has to be approved by either a park supervisor or the director, and then it comes to finance, and then finance puts that information into Cassell, and that's how the bill gets paid. But we're not seeing that, the revenue and expenses don't come in at the same time.
Well, I understand that, but obviously if you're coding, so the parks have many revenue sources, the park maintenance fee being one of them, but not the only one, correct?
I think parks has 3 revenue sources or 4.
4.
Specific.
And so the issue is that that although you code the revenues coming in, which I understand is fairly easy to do, but when you do an expense, you buy a stack of fertilizer, you have to make a decision whenever you're coding how to classify that, and there's currently not a way of classifying that as something that comes directly from the street maintenance fee, or not street, parks maintenance fee, sorry. And that's the issue that's in place. And the only solution I can think of, other than just going through the whole general ledger, and that's always fun, but if you do it in Excel, it's a little easier. But would be to, in the future, to have some sort of decision made that say, hey, this bag of fertilizer came from the parks maintenance fee, and maybe this one didn't, or maybe just say something to the effect that you can allocate it based on the percentages of the revenues or some other system, so that the citizens can, because I think what they really want to see is, we got this fee, but what's it going for? And there should be a way, maybe not, I understand the accounting systems going back and retroactively re-entering the data would be probably a job I wouldn't want to do myself. But but going forward, if there was some sort of way of marking or putting the GL code in there that says this particular bag of fertilizer was a street maintenance fee bag of fertilizer, then that would allow you to, in the future, to pull a report that says this is what the expenditures were from this revenue source. And I don't know if I'm really saying it the right way, but I have a suspicion that's what you're asking for. It's saying the money came in, where did it go? But since there's several different sources of the money, they all kind of mix into one big pot, and then they go out as part of the mixture, not part of the individual, not part of the individual funds. And so I think maybe the way to, because I think that this question will keep coming up in the future, is where is my tax dollars going? It goes back to that question that everybody asked, what's my tax dollars doing? I voted this parks maintenance fee in, or it was voted in, or I have to pay it, I don't have a choice to pay it, I have to pay it. So what's it doing? And so I think having something in the internal accounting system to say we're going to account for that will mean that you can pull a query in the future, that when the question comes up a year from now, if you've been coding the expenditures correctly, you would be able to then, or in a way, in a policy way, then the question can be answered easily, rather than just giving them a GL dump, that was just my thoughts as I was listening to the complaints, because what they really want to know is, where is this parks maintenance fee that I have to pay every month? Where is it going? And and I know the answer to that question isn't always easy, because you don't know this bag of fertilizer came from this revenue source and this bag of fertilizer came from another revenue source, but to have some sort of policy that says something to the effect that that we can split out. And maybe, and I would even, sometimes you can cheat by just saying percentage of revenues in, percentage of expenditures, apply the same percentage. And I don't know if that would
That's what
satisfy
the
that.
original that we tried to do was because the fee doesn't actually support the full amount of the park's expenditure.
Yeah, that's why I said you have multiple.
So
you
general
have like
fund kicks in.
Four things coming in and one expense going out. You can't really say this stream went to this bag of fertilizer and this stream went to another bag of fertilizer. But I think there may be some policy where it says, well, the street maintenance, or not, sorry, parks maintenance fee, accounts for whatever percentage, 30%, that therefore, the 30% of what's being spent comes from that revenue source. It's not, because I know the funds are not perfectly segregated right now, and I think to segregate them would be a lot of burdensome, but I think to have an answer to that question when it comes up again, and it will come up again, to be able to say, here is our answer, and this is how we got to the answer, and we have say this is our answer of what the money comes to. But I do understand the problem. I'm just trying to think of a good solution. I don't know if it's probably taking everybody's time, but accounting talk, but still, I think a way can be developed to give an answer to that question, even if it retroactive would be hard, but maybe going forward it'd be easier.
Then I think we all need to sit down and have a conversation on how to be able to present that, because it'd be very difficult to show a line item as an expense for just one line item and then try to allocate that out
to a
when
revenue
we don't
source,
have, when we don't have all of the bills coming in at the same time.
Yeah.
It's in the software we have isn't as sophisticated.
I imagine that to be the case. Like I say, I used to write accounting software, and that would be something that somebody would ask me, and I would.
So if you can come write the code, that'd
I would be
great.
very upset and put a change order in. But I understand the nature of the problem. I'm just saying is that a future discussion to come up with a solution, because that question will be asked multiple times by multiple people, and I think they have the right to know.
I'll give
But
them a
also-
GL detail, and they
but
can
I'll-
see all of their ins and
Yeah.
outs. I have no problem
Yeah,
with that.
but the idea is that we can present a solution to people when they ask in the future that, the question, where did my money go? I don't know if I helped. Chair. Yeah, okay.
So,
Davis. Brutal.
Bike and Pet Committee is pretty easy. It's actually on hiatus for 2 months. So we won't have a quorum for those 2 months. And so we, a long time, to the Library Committee, we have a long-time long-time committee member that is going to be leaving, Rick. And so we're going to have a little send-off for him, but then we're also obviously already have applications to replace that position. So right now, they were trying to schedule interviews like this week or next week or something, and we're like, yeah, it's pretty busy. So, but that is in the works. The library had open house. It was successful. And we have the big book sale coming up at the beginning of June. It'll be held right out here. And get your tickets for the patio tour. You can get that and take a look and see how everybody's using their outside space. And lots of budget talk, as you can imagine. So that's all I have.
I did fail to mention earlier, I wanted to wish the guy behind the mirror over here, Gordon Christensen, a belated happy birthday.
Well, he'll get it, but he's not here tonight, so.
I know, yeah.
City administrator business and staff reports. Ms. Eileen.
First item has already been called to your attention, and that's the city attorney's costs. And yes, they are high. We just paid the April today, and it has come down to 26, so we're on our way down. So that's good. Let's see, bi-monthly reports. I wanted to point out a few things in the bi-monthly report. There is an update the council policies and guidelines meeting tomorrow, I understand. So changes are still being made to that document, which is fine. In the court misdemeanor docket continues to be full and is operating smoothly, but in March 2025, the municipal court received a record number of violations cited to the court. So the revenue's down a little bit, but it's coming, we're expecting that it's going to come up. Haven't talked about the parking district master plan in a while, so I just wanted to mention that the City of Canby's Economic Development Department has begun work with Rick Williams Consulting regarding the downtown Canby parking assessment. So that's going. And then I also wanted to mention in the transit space, Transit is currently working with their landlord to expand their current office to potentially add an additional 800 square feet of space. And then Transit will look to build out the lot for bus storage. So just wanted to point out some items that were in the monthly report. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that we have hired a new HR director. He will be coming on board on June 30th. He comes from the military. He spent his entire career in the Oregon Army National Guard. So he's Colonel Wood, who is transitioning out of his military career in HR, in doing personnel matters, and coming into a civilian career. So he will start with us on June 30th, and we can't wait till he gets here. So we will introduce him when he gets here. And he's a Canby resident, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Great. Anything else, Eileen?
That's it.
Okay. Second opportunity for citizen input? Okay, seeing none, action review.
You approved the consent agenda. You adopted ordinances 1643, 1644, 1645, and 1646. You approved ordinance 1647, which will go for a second reading on June 4th. You adopted resolution 1433. You also approved IGAs with Clackamas County for homeless services funding, transferring the jurisdiction of Pine Street, and relating to storm drainage maintenance on portions of Southeast First Avenue, Southeast 13th Avenue, and Malino Road. There was also consensus to direct the budget officer to develop a budget with 20% reserves, and also to come back with a resolution to memorialize the reserve levels.
Nice job, thank you. I will take a motion to move into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I move into executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660, parent 2, parent B, to consider the dismissal or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent who does not request an open hearing.
Is that you, Paul? Motion's been made by Council President Hensley, seconded by Council Waterman, to move into executive session under pursuant ORS to 192.660, parent 2, parent B. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So that passes. We will be adjourning to executive session here shortly. Representatives of the news media and council authorized staff members may attend the executive session. Members of the media are specifically directed not to report on the topics discussed in the discussion that occurred during the executive session. City councilors are similarly reminded not to discuss executive session topics and deliberations with any third party. This includes, without limitation, family members, other appointed officials, e.g. planning commission members, library board members, etc., city staff and volunteers, members of the public, and members of the media. No decision may be made in executive session. If a final decision on any matter is necessary, the council will make that decision when it is in regular session. At the end of the session, there will be no further business. If a final decision on any matter is necessary, the council will make the decision when it is in a regular session. So to all of you, good night. We will possibly be back later on, if nothing else, to adjourn the meeting.